Suksabaite, Yakwe. Hey, y'all, and buenos dias. This is Simone Cottrell here, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm the manager of the Creative Arkansas Community Hub and Exchange Arts Resource Desk for the Northwest Arkansas Council, and I am beyond excited to moderate the 7th event in the You Love Speaker Series. And this 10-part free series focuses on points of passion. We'll explore various topics across art, music, culture, outdoor exploration, and culinary experiences in Northwest Arkansas region and growing cities around the country. Today's discussion, You Love Art, Progress Through Creativity, focuses on the effects of an emerging art scene in growing cities. We are thrilled to have an amazing panel of talented artists, creatives, and scholars joining us today. First up, we have Octavio Logo. Octavio's work explores a wide range of topics and techniques, including graphic novels and printmaking, bookbinding, mural, sculpture, and documentary. Logo's passion for the arts emerged from one of the world's most powerful public art traditions, Mexican muralism, a daily part of life in Logo's native Mexico City. Logo is committed to sharing his art and ideas beyond the traditionally private realm of galleries and began creating public murals throughout Mexico and in the United States. Logo can be found working alongside nonprofits, public schools, and emerging artists to help shape visual narratives of their communities. Logo is a recipient of the 2018 Artist 360 grant and an Artist Inc. facilitator. He is co-founder of Phoenix Fayetteville Gallery. Let's now welcome Corey Perry. Corey is an interdisciplinary artist based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. They received their Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Arkansas School of Art with a second major in African-American Studies. The Wingate Lamar Foundation has awarded Corey one of the most prestigious awards a U.S. undergraduate can receive, the 2019 Wingate Lamar Fellowship. Over the years, Corey has worked closely with multiple nonprofit organizations on various community engagement projects regarding arts and social justice, including the Artist Laboratory Theater, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, and Phoenix Fayetteville. Corey strives to focalize the needs of their community, compassionate service to others, and their core ideal. Next, I'd like to introduce Lauren Lowe Harris. Lowe is a self-taught Brooklyn-based illustrator and animator. Raised just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, Lowe has witnessed firsthand the nuanced ways that a burgeoning art scene can impact a city. Through her illustration practice, she aims to create work that champions vibrance, confidence, and celebrations of a more just and kind world. Lowe specializes in motion design and production for digital platforms. After graduating from Northwest University's Medill School of Journalism in 2018, she's created graphics and illustrations for a variety of brands and publications, including, but not limited to, the New York Times, Bustle, Amazon Prime Video, and Cosmopolitan. Currently, she works as an associate animator at NBC News, where she produces motion graphics for digital properties such as Stay Tuned, Today.com, NBCnews.com, and NBC News Now. We also have Lil Cool with us today, Joshua Maupin, AKA Lil Cool. He was born in Dallas, Texas, 1985. Disenchanted by the ways pop culture was slowly brainwashing the masses, Lil Cool took to painting as an act of defiance, beginning with spray paint. Since moving to New York in 2008, Lil Cool's repertoire has expanded to include painting, illustration, large-scale murals, photography, and fashion collaborations. His style transcends each medium it inhabits. From paneled comic strip style illustrations to abstracted interior stills that rethink modern living, Lil Cool's style manages to diametrically varied but immediately recognizable. His content draws from web culture, pop art, politics, and life in Brooklyn. Finally, and this is a real fancy name around the water cooler in my parts, we've got Richard Florida joining us. Richard is one of the world's leading urbanists. He is a researcher and professor serving as university professor at University of Toronto School of Cities and Rotman School of Management, and a distinguished fellow at NYU Schack School of Real Estate. He is a writer and journalist, having penned several global bestsellers, including the award-winning The Rise of the Creative Class and his most recent book, The New Urban Crisis. He is co-founder of CityLab, the leading publication devoted to cities and urbanism. He is a Heartland Forward member in the Northwest Arkansas region. He is he is an entrepreneur as founder of the Creative Class Group, which works closely with companies and governments worldwide. How can art serve to hide or wash major systemic issues that are often not addressed in capital improvement projects?
Well, just three quick points. One, I think public space and public art is extraordinarily valuable. As you said in your opening remarks, they're arenas for diversity, arenas for gathering, arenas for constructive civic protest. At the same time, not only provided by public dollars, increasingly supported by private dollars, and we've seen public space in a way become privatized, they can be arenas for private interests, for increasing private property values. We've seen that in New York with a park like the High Line that was created with great ideals by people who wanted to support and enhance the diversity of their neighborhood, but real estate developers took great advantage of that and extracted a lot of value out of that. So I think on that point, we have to be very vigilant, and we have to ensure that public space projects get the proceeds. And I think if done correctly, can get the proceeds and be programmed back into neighborhoods, into the arts community.
Hey, Octavio.
Hey there.
Hey, you've been like super duper busy lately. And can you talk to us a little bit about your most current initiatives and where we can find your work?
Well, many murals, but my work can be found in my studio in South Fayetteville, which I have some of big pieces there.
And what's it like telling the story of your community here in Northwest Arkansas?
You know, I was thinking since I came here, I have 5 years in US. So what is my community and what that means and what it means community? And I think that at the beginning I thought what was the meaning of that. But now I think that my work is trying to communicate and identify communities. There are plenty of communities, and it's not one community at all. It is difficult to say that my community is this because I'm an immigrant, and I feel sometimes that I don't get it yet, what is going on here.
How has this affected the overall culture in the area from your perspective?
Since I came here, I met more and more emergent artists, if I can say it like that, and more interest to go out of galleries and kind of institutional arts or places to exhibit art, to go beyond that. You know, I had the experience of one of my pieces were taken down when I was showing them because they were exhibit nudity. Still, at the last mural I did with junior high students, now we cannot install the mural because it's too political. So, but the things are changing, and the change is obvious, and you can see outside much more, like hundreds times more art than what I was seeing here just like 4.5 years ago. It's incredible.
This question's for you, Richard. Can you talk to us about your viewpoint on how you've seen public art change the urban landscape of a region?
If you look at the history of American art, you know, it is defined by our multicultural diversity, by African American, Latino, and the full flowering of the American mosaic. That said, I think public art, at least in the rise of the luxury city, the super city, the city maybe of not only gentrification, but plutocratization, has become a vehicle for exclusion and for gentrification. So I think we have to remain committed to art and public space, but we have to be ever vigilant that this art and artistic expression and the spaces in which the art is conducted in public space and public art is the kind of art that promotes multicultural diversity, that serves all interests, not just particular class or economic interests, and that benefits all of us broadly.
Hey, Corey. All right. Your family has been in Northwest Arkansas for 3 generations. And tell us about the positive impact from the growth of the region that you've noticed being here your entire life.
Yeah, positive growth. So everybody benefits from positive growth. It's always like a two-sided coin, you know. To start, my family are very resilient people, thinking about the history of the area and the progress that we've made. For example, my sister can remember seeing billboards going down 71B into Springdale saying, "We better not catch you after dark," right? Like signaling this is a sundown town. And that's within her lifetime. And she's only like 11 years older than me. So watching the growth in the area all the way coming to Bentonville taking down their Confederate monuments, it's been great on that aspect. Talking about the double-sided coin, we have this new sort of challenge is gentrification, right? And it's happening in our side of the town. And like we own our land. Like this is my grandparents' land that we live on currently. And to think about that, positive growth has been sort of challenging for me because I have people calling me all the time trying to buy the land when it's clearly stated that the land is not for sale. And so I'm having like these daily mental battles of, no, you can't buy my land. No, you can't buy the land. Like I said, it's a two-sided coin.
One of the things I would really love to hear your thoughts on is the lack of Black artists and need for inclusivity of Black artists in this area for public art in this particular kind of work. Can you talk to us about your views on this?
There's a bunch of murals happening around the town, and they're very beautiful murals, right? But the majority of them aren't made by Black artists. I would even go as far to say like most of them aren't. And it sort of baffles me how there are more Black faces and Black bodies on these murals than there are artists making the murals. And people can't use the excuse like there's no Black creatives, because there are a ton of Black creatives in this town doing this sort of work. And I want to take this moment to give them a shout out. Just 3 people real quick: Maddie Moon, Veronica Huff, and Brianna Cole. Like, they are great artists and y'all need to look them up.
Hey, Ms. Lowe. You went to school in Birmingham and spent several years there during a real economic boom attributed to the growing arts and cultural scene. What was it like being a part of that growth in that creative space?
So I grew up in Birmingham from kindergarten to senior year of high school, and then I eventually ended up moving to the Midwest for college. But one of the things that I found most interesting about that experience was seeing how the narrative around Birmingham, like a lot of people called it Boringham, and like there was this narrative when I was younger about like people not wanting to stay in Birmingham, people wanting to go to Atlanta, people not really seeing a point of being there. And this was, it kind of juxtaposed my high school experience because I attended the Alabama School of Fine Arts in Birmingham, which had been around, I believe, since the 70s. They have like a variety of different art specialties there, from music to theater to creative writing to visual arts. I was a creative writing student. But one thing that I found interesting about that high school experience was that I felt like I was put at the center of this Birmingham art scene from a very young age, because a lot of the students, whether they were dance students or theater students or like musicians, they actually would do a number of shows for the public. So about 2/3 of the performances that the school would do, whether it was like a symphony, you know, anything, was actually kind of like this public, it was put out into this public sphere. So people from the Birmingham area would come and like see, you know, these kids perform these beautiful pieces and orchestras and these like modern jazz pieces for dance and all of these things. And then also kind of getting to grow up in a space where we started to see more art festivals, for example, and we as students would actually go volunteer and participate in those art festivals, which was really cool. I don't think I realized what I was witnessing while I was there, but I think in retrospect, it sort of helped me realize like the power of like an arts community and like how that can impact the narrative of a city. And so I'm a digital artist, and a lot of what I've been seeing in terms of with everything happening with Black Lives Matter is that a lot of non-Black artists have actually been building a following by like, you know, creating these like, you know, tribute pieces depicting like the faces of, you know, these like dead Black folk. And, you know, a lot of artists that I know, a lot of my friends have actually noticed a slowdown in the amount of companies that are approaching them to do freelance work, because a lot of companies kind of hopped on this bandwagon of saying, we need a Black artist now, to like do this BLM thing, like this mural right quick, hurry up while it's still relevant, here's some money, and then they really never approach them again.
Now, the next question I have is for Josh. Now, you've been in Brooklyn for many years, and you can speak to the changes you've noticed there. Would you like to add anything?
I think we've all noticed, like anyone that's gone to New York before, like it changes so often. Like Manhattan area, especially in Soho and like Lower East Side, is kind of on its way, kind of turning into like a outdoor mall in a sense for tourism and, you know, for people to come and spend money. When, you know, it used to be like neighborhood driven and used to have communal, you know, areas where you could chill and have a little cafe to sit at, or like, you know, not have to deal with Starbucks around the corner or like some overpriced like Whole Foods kind of scenario. And as you've seen the city kind of grow in a sense, like obviously like we want safer neighborhoods, we want, you know, better public transit, we want better like places to live. But with all that too, I think with the city being so money driven, they've like displaced a lot of people, and at the same time like actually latched on to artists to help do that in a sense, doing public art and doing murals. And even growing up in the graffiti scene here, a lot of early developments and you'd say like Bushwick or even Williamsburg would almost approach, I've been approached by several companies, even like some of my friends, the same kind of situation where the developer would be like, hey, we have a building, let's paint a big mural on it, you know, like let's make it cool, let's make it hip, like, you know, we love your work, we love your colors, like brighten up the neighborhood, right? And so as an artist, you're like excited to show your work in this platform, but then all of a sudden you realize that they're actually using you to help gentrify a neighborhood faster. We see a lot of this happening over and over in the city. Like with the pandemic right now, it's actually kind of special to see everything kind of at a halt.
What was it like to emerge as an artist in Brooklyn, coming from a small town in Texas?
It was pretty difficult, to be honest, in the beginning. So I grew up in a town outside of Dallas called Frisco, and it was basically a cow town when I was younger, and then it kind of blew up to be like a bustling suburban environment. As I grew up, I watched gentrification happen too in a small area, which I also didn't understand what it was when I was younger. But as I got older, it was like, wow, we have a mall now. We have Starbucks. We got all these like, you know, amenities that are so nice. You know, it's just like things that in a suburban mind of like adolescence, like this is cool. But then when you start to break it down, and I watched like friends get, you know, having to move out of their houses, and families that we grew up with, like they couldn't afford the rent anymore, let alone just couldn't afford the community. It was kind of like, okay, this is probably a more of a bigger issue. But as I was growing as an artist, like through experience, traveling, meeting other people, getting involved in like subgenres and really small, you know, niche little social scenes, everything was like leading towards New York.
And what barriers are you trying to break now with your platform?
It's strange because I grew up in like a kind of conservative Christian family, and I'm the one that kind of had to rebel and push the limits. And obviously like my father's a football coach, so I had to, you know, I had that too. Texas football is very serious, and growing up that way, I had to play football too as a kid. So there was a part of me where I had to do the whole sports thing, and I enjoyed it. But I remember my sophomore year of high school, like I went to my dad and I was like, I'm going to quit football to make art. And he was devastated. And it was a struggle for him for a little while. And then he eventually got over it. Then always getting tested by my family every time I would come back to town, because they would love to debate. And like my aunt and uncle, like they live on a beautiful property in a ranch like in Colorado, and they're huge, you know, Trump supporters, and it's awful. But at the same time, like I can't tell them that they're wrong. And so what I'm kind of learning is that it works for them, and you know, in all these ways I can be like can critique it. But you know, when you're dealing with like a baby boomer generation, they're comfortable and they don't want things to change. I think what I've learned from my approach to it now is that I can be by example, and like moving forward, I would rather find out ways that we can get along and communicate, have the tough conversations where we do disagree, but we also can find a understanding or respect for each other.
How are you using your platform to break barriers?
I think that being like a Black artist and a Black woman artist, I think there's like this unspoken expectation that Black artists are supposed to like really make their work about like trauma and pain and like the experiences of suffering. And I think my work is definitely a lot more focused on celebrations of joy, feminine joy, Black joy, color, confidence. And then one thing that I am more conscious about doing as well is one thing that I like to do on my personal platforms is to shed some light or spotlight, you know, another artist. A lot of times they are like female artists, women of color artists, and really sort of try to, you know, use my platform as I'm coming up to like reach a hand and pull someone up with me, and sort of like, you know, like I don't believe in networking up and down. I believe that everyone around you is your network, and you should do your part to really like help folks come up with you.
What I do to break barriers is like I like to share my resources. because it's really hard to get into gallery spaces and sell work. So whenever I had that opportunity, I tried to provide space for people.
This is such an interesting topic. I truly feel like art is very powerful. It's a communication tool. I must say that truly for me it's a challenge to be in a foreign country addressing things that are very personal, like my own communication and my needs to communicate. But also something I can say is I can have a lot of backlash about what I do, but I'm seeing less Confederate flags in my neighborhood lately. And I'm proud of that. And I feel like my work can be confusing for some people, but if you reach out to me, instead of just criticizing, sometimes I think that we can find better points of communication. So what I get sometimes is like, why? But not like, actually not even why. It's like you. But it's not about me, you know. I just want to invite people to continue changing with their work, their environments. And we will fail and we will succeed, but if we help each other to address those things, instead of criticizing, just like giving feedback, I think that will be very, very productive for everyone.
When you were in Illinois studying to be a journalist, you were involved in white liberal art spaces that were sharing Black people's stories. I feel this can also be said in the art world. How does this affect the authenticity of art and writing?
Yeah, so when I was at Northwestern, I did study journalism there, and it was very interesting because as freshmen, you know, I think there were like 4 other Black kids in the freshman class out of like hundreds of kids, which is wild. But one of the first things they ask is like, oh, why do you want to be a journalist? And they have this little slideshow and everyone's like, give a voice to the voiceless. And I'm like, again, going back to like this whole thing about like being in control of your own narrative, I think that it's super important that like folks, you know, from particular communities are able to really tell their stories and communicate their stories through art and to kind of express like the nuances of that. Because I think, you know, with like popular media, a lot of our stories are kind of filtered through like these very Eurocentric, very specific, very limited perspectives that really sort of glosses over the nuance of like what folks are bringing to the table. In terms of art, again, just going back to the earlier point I made about like, you know, being able to make sure that, you know, during like movements like Black Lives Matter, that like Black artists are being heard and are kind of like, I'm not even going to say given a seat at the table because they were supposed to have a seat at the table. So like, just don't take their seat. Don't rip the seat from under their butts as they're trying to sit down and like, you know, lay down the law there.
You said that art creates a portal to enter a space, but not necessarily boundaries on how to interact with it. How can we change this and create those boundaries?
When I was going to school, like in Illinois, like one thing that a lot of Northwestern students like to do was actually go to the Pilsen neighborhood in Chicago, which is primarily Latinx. And Pilsen is well known for having all of these murals that are done by Latinx artists around that community. And so, you know, this underground art scene sort of developed where like a lot of like, you know, underground bands and stuff would start playing and like house parties, and a lot of Northwestern students and just like, you know, students like from the University of Chicago or, for example, will kind of, you know, fuse and melt themselves into, you know, this experience, which is fine. Like you can participate in art, but I think the onus is kind of on everybody, like for the artists who are already existing there to like continue to reaffirm like where that space is, what that space is rooted in. And I think the onus is also especially on the people who are entering that space to kind of understand how to engage with that space in a way that is like respectful and not like appropriative or kind of like pushes it, you know, and like kind of like claims it or like takes it away from like the original roots. So just being able to kind of respect like the underground scenes and kind of like what, like where they come from, because like we see it, you know, in fashion, you know, like lots of b-boy fashion, it's like, you know, that came from somewhere, like Supreme, like that came from like Black skater kids and stuff. And like now like Supreme is like this like label where it's like, you know, a bunch of like rich kids are just like sitting there, you know what I mean? Just having a good time. And no one really realizes that Black skater culture had a lot to do with that, for example, or even like with graffiti arts, when like a Black or brown person is doing that, it is considered like vandalism. So like understanding like the history of criminalization that goes with that is like very important to moving forward as well.
Richard, You've stated that for the creative economy to survive, this nation, its states, and its cities need a large-scale recovery strategy. This strategy must be bottom up, but supported across the board. In Arkansas, tourism is the second highest contributor to the state's economy, thanks in some parts to arts and cultural institutions and events in Northwest Arkansas, which are slowly reopening to the public. For individual artists and creatives living in rural areas, what strategies have been the most effective in making sure our needs are being heard and supported by policymakers?
The data and evidence are just terrifying in what's happened to the artistic and cultural community in America. A third of all artists, broadly defined, creatives, have experienced unemployment. If the annual salaries were, say, $40,000, which is not great, but it's not terrible, they've been reduced to $14,000. COVID-19 has been painful for a lot of Americans, but the arts community has just taken such a body blow. And I think, I've been watching the Democratic National Convention, so I am more positive than I have been about America in a long time. I mean, I see something very important happening there. And not only from a political point of view, I see integrity and personal decency again. But with the current White House, we're not going to have much help. So it's going to have to be up from the bootstraps, Simone. We could create platforms for locally sourced culture. And it's quite an opportunity, right? Because people want cultural stimulation. Maybe now's a time where we can show them by having locally sourced platforms. It's all around them, and they could, and it can be brought to bear in their neighborhood. Maybe we make sure that there are performers and artists on every corner, and that we animate our cities with arts and culture in a way we never have before, but it's locally sourced and it's historical, and it elaborates those contradictions. So I think we have a great opportunity. I mean, it's a tragic time, it's a difficult time, but I think we have a really great opportunity.
Everybody, now we're going to take some questions from the audience. What are your favorite public art pieces in the NWA region? The first thing that I thought of is not going to be your traditional 2D or 3D art. I want to definitely talk about theater and how performing artists have really truly struggled on how to get the masses together. And one of the most amazing performances that I've seen in Northwest Arkansas is by Arkansas Stage, and they created Curbside Theater, which was an original devised theater, all women, running this thing. And what they did was create an original theater piece that could be packed up. They had people register, and they would go to their homes and set up in their backyards or in public parks with only limited seating, and perform this original theater that was somewhat improv, that was somewhat devised. One of the success stories out of that was how many families who have children with disabilities got to see theater for the first time. What are some ways we at home can support public art during COVID to ensure artists are able to continue to create and do this important work? Josh, I'm going to take it to you.
It should start on kind of a small scale, more driven towards community. I don't know. I think a lot of people have realized that since life's been able to slow down, that we've gotten to kind of stop and smell the roses in a sense, and being able to say yo, this is my neighbor over here. I've never met this person before. Let me go and just be a human being. And I think that by doing that is allowing more people to come out of their shell and being a sense of community, small areas. We haven't had a chance to sometimes actually sit there and be this is my neighborhood. Let me meet the people that live around me. Let's talk about stuff. Let's maybe start a community project. If we work in smaller groups and communities, I think it'll build up and make it even stronger, especially when things get back to normal.
To support, I would say buy their art, right? Pay them their worth. And I want to particularly highlight Black trans art. It's really hard to survive right now. And I think the best way you at home could help people and help artists during this time is to support them and buy their art.
I feel to build narratives, what I'm seeing a lot is institutions or cities or something asking to define artists, what is this region, or express what Fayetteville is, or what is this community. Or I think that something that could help to address things that people want to see is getting some feedback from people that like the work that we are producing, and inviting us to create things that they want to see, or they want to co-participate, giving me ideas. I feel sometimes I'm channeling things And I would like to have some kind of inviting me to work with a community project to produce something together, how we develop a narrative together.
Buy the art, commission them. If you find yourself in that position, like with a company, commission, like actually reach out and help them build commercial value as well.
I don't know any better translator of worlds than artists. What do you want the audience to take away from today?
Respecting the narrative. I keep saying this, but again, going back into controlling, respect a person's narrative and allow them to be able to tell their narrative and tell their story.
Always ask clarifying questions, whether it's about a project, a contract, or if you're in a neighborhood space that's new to you, always ask these clarifying questions.
I like that. Asking questions about the meaning of the things and reach out to artists to do that.
To listen more, I think people talk a lot and everyone loves a platform to like voice their opinion, but let's start to listen to some of those opinions. Let's start to like find ways to, communicate the right answers, not attacking each other, not trying to cancel each other out. Let's listen. We're all on this like sinking ship together, and it's going to get worse if we don't start figuring out solutions,
Be inclusive. Behind me is the skyline of Toronto. And in Toronto, we don't think in terms of a melting pot. We call it a mosaic experience where every single person is valued ethnically, racially, individually, socioeconomically. Be inclusive and build a true mosaic where each and every one of us, our true capabilities and creativities are valued and invested in. I think we'll be okay if we do that.
All right, y'all, audience, panelists, everybody, we did it. And that's all the time that we have today. So thank you so much for joining us. And let's give our speakers some love and thank you for being here. Be well.
Thank you.